parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Oh, this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Class is in session. Please be seated. Behaviors that get attention get repeated. Avoid the power struggle cause it will get you heated. Listen to Amanda cause she knows how to teach it. Yo, this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Oh, this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Yeah, yeah,
Hello and welcome to Parenting with a Punch show. I am your host, Amanda Houle, founder of parentingwithapunch.com. Visit my website to learn about all the ways that you can work with me and check out my iFund Women's campaign that's helping me find a space to be able to host these amazing podcasts bi-weekly with guests from all over the country. I am excited to bring on Eliza Wagner from the founder of ES Tutoring and Consulting. So let's please give her a warm welcome. Hello.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Happy Monday.
Thanks.
So let's tell all of our viewers about ES Tutoring, where you're located, and the type of services that you provide.
Sure. So ES Tutoring and Consulting provides one-on-one services for students in all subjects, K-12, and we do a lot of work with students who struggle with executive functioning, study skills, organization. We do ADHD coaching, and the coaching actually goes up through college and even beyond. And we work right now primarily on the South Shore of Boston, but we service the Boston metro area, and we also offer remote tutoring through Skype or any other video conference. So we have a wide range of areas we can serve.
Fabulous. So now, where do you typically meet? Do you go to the clients' homes? Do you have like certain, like the library or different, depending on what the family wants?
Yeah, so we do both clients' homes or the library right now. And as of this summer, we should have an office space where we can also be meeting with students.
Excellent. Really cool. Really cool. So I'd love to hear some about, we'll talk all about growth mindset, because I know that's a lot of the work that you do, especially with executive functioning, because that sort of plays a role in all areas of development, right? When it comes to academics. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the ADHD coaching, or I guess that's tied in, right, with the executive functioning, of course, correct?
Yeah, there is a range. So a lot of students can struggle with executive functioning without any sort of ADHD diagnosis. And there's kind of a spectrum. A student with ADHD will likely have a slightly different set of needs. Executive functioning is one piece of it, but then there's also attention and focus and a few other pieces of ADHD that are a little bit different. So everything we do is customized to the student. So we don't have a prepackaged approach or a set curriculum. Every single thing we do is customized and built in sessions with the kids. So it's important for us that the student has ownership over what we're doing and is sort of an equal partner in creating it. So even if we end up creating, a template for writing an outline that's almost the same in the end, it's very important that it's not a handout we just give to the student, but something they help us build, because then they see the process, they have decisions they get to make about how it's set up. Even the layout and the wording of it is, more theirs.
Yeah.
So we really don't have a sort of, this is what we do with kids with executive functioning, for example. There's patterns and similarities, but it's really customized to the student and their needs.
Yeah, no, that's great, because I think you hear so much, especially in schools, and as I'm sure we can both agree that the support for executive functioning is not always the best or as like one-to-one as we would like in the school system. And I think a lot of families probably, when they hear executive functioning or like they hear, that their child needs support in academics, that they automatically think that there's like a one size fits all.
Absolutely not.
And I totally agree. So I love hearing that's your approach and how you go about it, because every single child is unique, right? And
Absolutely.
they all learn so differently. And one approach that you use might not work with another. You have to be able to, transform or work with the child and how he learns, right?
Yeah. Though I will say there are some things teachers can do in the classroom that will help students with executive functioning and will actually benefit all students. So there's some pretty simple things that, students who are really struggling and maybe have a diagnosis, they absolutely require those interventions or accommodations, but they'll actually benefit all students. So things like using checklists or graphic organizers or creating sort of interim deadlines to scaffold a longer term project. Right. Showing students models of this is what we're looking for, having all feedback for students, all directions, be both verbal and written. Little things like that aren't that hard to implement. It's not a drastic change. It doesn't require like one-to-one work. Right. And it's, essential for students with executive functioning challenges just to be able to kind of access the material and show their skills. But it's helpful for every student. It's helpful for adults, right? We need checklists.
Absolutely, especially as business owners, right? I mean, we constantly have to be like planning out our weeks and scheduling in where our clients are, and certain things that we have to do. That's part of the absolutely. I actually say to a lot of my clients, I'm like, if I had somebody that could like give support, and I had all these organizational tools when I was your age, I'm like, I would be golden. You have no idea the kind of support that you have now, and like how beneficial it is and how much it will serve you as an adult.
I just feel like there's sort of a myth around, incorporating teaching executive skills in the classroom, that it's this giant undertaking that involves curriculum overhaul or involves a huge amount of one-to-one instruction, which is obviously not realistic. Right. And some kids still require that, but in general, there's some really simple and easy, little adjustments you can make to existing curriculum that will just kind of make it easier for all of the students. So I just wanted to say that, it's not necessarily something that teachers can't do easily every day, just as a different way of thinking about it.
Absolutely. And I think it's probably tough too, depending on like what their training is. And if they don't necessarily, I mean, you would think that most teachers would, know to sort of implement some of these things. But I think through experience and working in schools like all over New York and, in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, that some just don't have that training, or they don't really know like how to respond or what to do with kiddos that struggle with some of these things. And they automatically, I think, get frustrated naturally. And, it's a bummer, but I think it's
then there's not much time built into their day for planning, and there's usually little to no time built in for collaboration. So one of the best ways to get ideas about meeting the needs of a diverse set of learners is to be able to meet with other teachers and say, hey, what do you do? Or, hey, do you have any ideas for how I could do this? And teachers they don't have that time. They barely have time to prep for their own classes.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's tough. It is really tough. So let's talk about like growth mindset, because you had said that, when you're working with your kiddos, you're really trying to teach them all about like progress and, having that, I guess, more of like that positive mindset, right? And knowing that support. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and like your approach with growth mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. So Carol Dweck is the one who's written extensively about growth mindset. So you can go to her for the source.
Yeah.
But the basic idea is that students, or people in general, adults too, who have a fixed mindset tend to believe that certain capabilities or skills are inherent from birth and aren't really changeable, that even something like IQ is fixed and not really changeable. And so that will show up in students as them saying things like, I'm just not good at math, or I'm bad at grammar, in a way that's a belief that it's permanent, right? This is just a deficit I have. Whereas somebody with growth mindset will believe that all of those skills can be improved with practice primarily. And so they're more likely to say, I'm really struggling with this, but I know I can work at it and improve. And that my skills are not sort of inherent, but more related to whether I like that subject, whether I'm interested and motivated to practice it a lot, and how often I practice it, right? So the student who says I'm just bad at grammar, I say, well, do you like grammar? No. How often do you practice grammar, right? As little as they possibly can. And so a lot of the growth mindset work is about helping students reflect on their process and think about sort of what are the systems they're putting in place, right? So with a grammar analogy, I sometimes compare it to if I wanted to learn how to surf, and I surfed twice this year, and it was a miserable failure both times. Does that mean I was born bad at surfing? Or does that mean I just haven't really put in the time and the practice to improve? And so that's sort of how I help students understand that. So in terms of more concrete ideas for how I incorporate that into my work with students, if they have a low grade on a test or an essay, we don't just sort of say to the student, well, you need to work harder, you need to study longer, right? It's about, well, how did you prepare for this test? And which parts of the test did you maybe do better at than others? So maybe on this test, you really did well with the multiple choice section, but the open responses were harder. And then we look at your process and, oh, look, you spent a lot of time, using flashcards and Quizlet to memorize the information, but what did you do to prepare for the open response section, right? So it's not that they're bad at those sections, it's that their preparation didn't really prepare them for that section of the test.
Set them up for success, right?
And teaching kids to reflect on their own process and slowly develop the metacognitive skills to analyze what's working and what can I change, and that it's not that there's something wrong with me or I just can't do this. I can change my systems and have a different outcome. And maybe I will never be, a grammar superstar, but I can get better, right? I'm not just bad at it. I can improve. But one of the most important pieces of this for me too is not just taking the low grade and analyzing sort of what went wrong, what you could do differently. It's equally, if not more important, to take that A grade and say, so what worked? Let's look at how you prepared or how you wrote this essay or what your process was and what led to this success. And so students get a sense of, well, what do you want to keep doing? What do you want to make sure you do again next time? And I feel like parents and teachers are more likely to sort of gloss over the A or the B even and just be like, great work. But then the C, D, F, they're like, okay, we really need to, you really need to do better. You really need to work harder. And then the students go home and say, well, what does that mean? I feel like I am working hard and not getting the outcome I want. And so they get frustrated. Their confidence plummets. And that's where they start, these myths they tell themselves about, I'm just bad at this, I'm bad at writing, that kind of thing. And that's not true. And it's not about working harder. It's usually about working differently. So if the way you're preparing for this test is not an effective method, you could spend 16 hours studying for this test and it's not going to make a difference. It's not about sort of time input, right? It's about working strategically and efficiently. And a lot of that has to do with understanding their, unique brain wiring, their learning style, and then sort of customizing whatever the strategy is around writing, around test preparation for that student. And they can usually actually work for shorter periods of time and be much more successful.
Yes. And you touched upon the self-esteem, which I was going to say, you would agree that a lot of this is self-confidence, and kids, like you said, the teachers, they're giving the negative feedback with the D's and the F's, and then, the A's and the B's, they're not, either way, they're not really giving feedback as to like how they could try better, like ways to be able to try and improve. So naturally the child is going to think badly about themselves, and they're going to think like that they can't do it. Like you said, like the fixed mindset over the growth mindset, and probably working on like building their self-esteem and confidence through probably creating the systems that work for them, I would say, right? And then you see the difference and like their boost, and they're like, oh, I can do this.
And it's not that there's something wrong with me. It's the way I learn is, square peg, round hole. It's not really the way that my classes are taught. And students, usually come to me having struggled quite a bit, and they're looking around at their classmates that they perceive to be not struggling, and things are coming easily to them, and that's not always true, right? You don't really know somebody's internal experience,
right?
But they still feel like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? And everybody else seems to be able to do this. And they're often not given any feedback, especially with writing assignments. I've noticed that students will just get a grade and they won't get any sort of written comments or a rubric or feedback on how to improve. Sometimes they
Right.
won't even, on a midterm exam with a writing portion and some other portions, they won't even actually know what led to their grade. They won't know how they did on the different portions.
Right.
And then students who've been struggling for a while develop, maladaptive coping strategies. They tend to procrastinate a lot because it's uncomfortable, so they avoid it. And
Right.
students with executive functioning challenges don't know how to break it down into manageable steps.
Yes.
And they're not confident, so they try to avoid. And then parents see that, and what it looks like on the outside is a student who's on YouTube all afternoon, and so then the parent feels that their child is lazy, undisciplined, again, just needs to work harder. And even though, yes, it looks like the student's not working at all, there's a whole different internal experience happening that's actually usually pretty painful for the student. And that's not to say some students aren't slightly immature, impulsive, and just want to, everybody would rather be on YouTube than studying.
Right. Yeah.
But there's always more to it than that. There's a bunch of different root causes for procrastination, and sort of uncovering what the root cause is will help you determine how best to help that student. But no matter what, helping them develop a belief system that they're lazy and not working hard enough is never going to be effective. And then students internalize that. And it could even just be one teacher that sort of plants that seed. It's not even necessarily the parents. And then that's just, it grows from there,
No, it's true, because you hear kids use the term lazy, and I think I'm echoing, but it's fine. You get to hear my voice in double. But yeah, it's like, where do you hear this word lazy? Like, what? Like, why do you think you're lazy? And it's true that they're internalizing it. Now, do you find that it can be difficult to sort of like communicate with the parents, with this mindset piece, as far as like they communicating to the child that they're lazy and having, like, do they seem to understand when you sort of like break it down sometimes? I'm sure you probably get all ends of the spectrum, as far as some that have a harder time probably processing and realizing, right?
Absolutely. And a big piece of the work I do, both with students and with parents, is infused with a deep understanding of psychology and, child and adolescent development, being able to read people. I do a lot of parent coaching, and you have to be able to sort of read the parent and understand what sort of feedback maybe they're open to or ready for, and sort of how to present it. So some parents come to me and from the get-go are eager for my feedback, will basically, follow any suggestion I give, ask questions, are really open to those suggestions and that feedback. Other parents have, a slightly different sort of perspective on what they think is going on with their child. And sometimes I get the feeling that, I can't come in strong right away. I need to sort of build more of a rapport, a sense of trust, help them start to, again, sort of trust in my expertise, and then find ways to sort of more slowly and gently intervene in hoping to, shift their mindset. So sometimes it's in the course of a phone call. I can say, well, I think there's more going on. Hey, there's this article that I think might be really helpful for you to read, and then send it to them. And then that can open the door for more conversation. So there's a range. Parents want help for their child. They want their child to succeed. They want the best for their child. And so ultimately I found all parents are open to suggestions and guidance. But for some, it's just a slower process, like with anybody. We need to be ready for it before we can really hear it and respond to it. And same thing with students. Some students come to me highly resistant, and I ask them about sort of what their goals are, what they're struggling with, why they're here. And they're like, I don't know. My parent made me. They're forcing me to come. I don't want to be here.
I'm being forced.
Exactly. And that doesn't usually last long. At the initial stages of working with a family, it's all about, getting to know each other and building rapport. Some students that takes longer than others, but we're well equipped to handle that.
Absolutely. So what's the number one concern that you would say that you hear from parents when they're reaching out for services?
Study skills.
Yeah.
Absolutely, study skills, whether there's any sort of diagnosis or learning disability or not. Even students without those challenges, teachers tend to not explicitly teach study skills. So
because they have to teach to the curriculum, right? They have no room.
And even within that, teachers will say study for tomorrow's test, but not break down, well, how do you study for a test?
Right.
Even, some of the best teachers will give, a comprehensive study guide before a test, which is awesome. But then the student doesn't necessarily know what to do with the study guide. And their way of studying is to reread notes or reread the textbook. And that's a passive way of learning, and you're not really going to retain too much. And you really can't do that for every single thing. With the study guide, the first step is, well, look through it and think about which material do I feel confident that I know well, and which material do I know I need to really spend the most time on, and then prioritize, right? And that's, even that simple task, a lot of students are never taught. And some students can pick up on the study skills a little bit more implicitly and just kind of figure it out along the way. And some students really need it spelled out much more, step by step. And there aren't generally classes on how to organize your binder, how to use a planner, how to make sure your backpack isn't exploding by the end of the week. How to create your own checklist. None of that is really incorporated into the classroom. And part of me understands because, there's a set curriculum and there's limited time. There's also part of me that feels like there are some really simple, quick and easy ways that you can do some of that. Realistically, of course, you're not going to take your math class to reorganize everybody's binders and backpacks. I get that. But, there are a little bit, I think a little bit more ways that teachers, even just saying, okay, tomorrow's test, brainstorm ideas, tell me, call on the class. How do you think you could prepare for tomorrow's test? What are all the different things you could do? And make a quick list on the board. Making sure kids are recording their homework in their planner. That's a big one.
Yeah, that is a big one. And I see, even kids that are on 504 and IEPs, sometimes it still seems to be a struggle, which I get it because they have a full classroom, right? And depending on whether or not, if they even have an assistant or, depending on the classroom structure, it can be hard.
And as students get into middle and high school, then a lot of the homework assignments are posted online.
Right.
But what I see often is not every teacher is posting them online. So sometimes students get a handout and there's no written homework. They just know that they have a handout to do. Some teachers will write the homework on the board at the end of class. Some teachers will post online, but even then, some will post to Google Classroom, and then some will post, on the school's portals. So there's, 4 different possible ways that the homework is delivered. And students, especially at the beginning, they don't remember to check all of these different. And then there's, study guides sometimes are posted in Google Classroom, sometimes on Plus Portal, sometimes handed out. So that's, for a student with executive functioning challenges, that's a nightmare. For any student, that's a learning curve. And there isn't a class on how to do that, so the study skills are probably the number one request, because that also informs everything. That has to do with test preparation, that has to do with success with writing, and just general, being able to submit homework assignments on time. And that's, I have students, that's really their only obstacle is they're doing poorly because they're so inconsistent with homework. So that's the number one issue that we see.
Now, if you were to give one suggestion to parents that were like thinking about reaching out to get that support, what would you say? What would you say to them?
First of all, the support is always beneficial. So, sometimes parents sort of wait until it's a bigger problem. They're optimistic that things will improve, and that sometimes happens. Or some parents, I think, have a belief somehow that tutoring services are only for either dire situations or for students with some sort of diagnosis or learning disability. But really, any student can benefit. And when in doubt, if there are concerns, the earlier you get the support in place, the more successful the student will be. And you don't have to continue it, right? It doesn't have to be a long-term, I had one student, a college student, I think I met with her 4 or 5 times, and then she didn't need me anymore. She was, it's a little easier maybe with older kids, but, she was launched and good to go for the year. And that's not always, typically the case, but with anybody, the earlier you get the support in place, the better the outcome. And then maybe, the child only needs, a handful of sessions or a few months of support, and then, they can take it from there. So don't wait. That would be my biggest advice.
Yes. No, I agree. Because even in my line of work, you hear it all the time, especially with the parents of younger children. They think that it's going to go away, or they think that it's going to get better with age, or they're going to grow out of it. And then I get the families that are, 8, 9, 10, even a little bit older, that they're like still struggling. with behaviors. And it's like, well, I mean, you knew you should have listened to your instinct when you were younger, right? And now it's going to be that much more difficult and you're struggling even more. So it's true.
Even if the student does grow out of it, it doesn't need to be a struggle for the whole family until then, right? So, again, even if there's no diagnosis and,
Right.
no huge concerns,
Right.
it also shouldn't have to be, often, especially by the, preteen years, it becomes a battle, a big source of conflict at home, or just the student, even if it's not the student, is having kind of a hard time, and waiting for them to grow out of it for a lot of kids is what they need, right? The frontal lobe needs to develop a lot more
Right.
before they have these skills, but it doesn't
Yep.
have to be such a struggle along the way. It doesn't have to result in low confidence.
I agree. More empowerment for our kiddos, for our parents, and families in general. So I want to share for anyone that's interested in learning more about ES tutoring, you can visit estutoring.com. If I will show it, it pops up. Yeah, I've been doing this for how long? Let's see. Does it show? Come on. But I did say, so it's estutoring.com, and I'm trying to show it. But it's fine. It'll be transferred over to audio anyway. So estutoring.com for anyone that is interested in learning more about working with Eliza and her staff at estutoringandconsulting.com. Thank you so much for being on the show today. It was such a pleasure speaking with you and learning all about the services that you provide that are so detriment and important for our children and to help support families. So thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Well, that was your bi-weekly show with my amazing guest, Eliza, Parenting with a Punch. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, keep asking for more. You deserve it, your family deserves it, and your children deserve it.
Yo, this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Oh, this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Class is in session. Please be seated. Behaviors that get attention get repeated. Avoid the power struggle cause it will get you heated. Listen to Amanda cause she knows how to teach it. Yo, this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Oh, this ain't parents out to lunch. No, this is parenting with the punch. Yeah.